Nothing will crush a real estate investor's spirit like landlord stress. The difference between being successful and miserable in managing properties is education. Welcome to Landlord University, where landlords learn. Landlord University is recorded from inside the RentPrep office, where Stephen White and Jeff Pearson share the lessons learned from working with some of the most successful landlords.
Welcome to Landlord University Night School. I'm Jeff Pearson. I'm here with my co-host, Stephen White. Hello, Stephen. How are you doing this evening?
Hey, Jeff. Pretty good. So today we're going to be talking about ban the box, and you probably have heard the term. If you have no familiarity with it, you probably have heard it on the news lately because a lot of states are starting to jump on this new trend of banning the felony box on an application. So, specifically on an employment or a rental application where you have that little checkbox that says, "Have you been convicted of a felony?" And the main focus is to try to limit the amount of discrimination for convicted felons and let them re-enter or rejoin society without having that attachment to their past of past criminal records and things like that. And obviously, there are people on both sides of the fence of this topic. On one side, you have people who say, "I have that right to know if they've, if they've had a criminal record, and I want to know that, and it absolutely has relevance to, to hiring them or to renting to them." And then on the other side, you've got the advocates for these people who, some of them, you have to consider are genuinely trying to rejoin society and get back into a normal life. And it's very difficult for them to do that after having a criminal record that's going to follow them around, and, it's going to have an impact on them. So, there's a lot of civil rights organizations and, different advocates that are really trying to push this, and states are really jumping on it. And so I think it's something that's going to continue to spread across the U.S. Right now, there's, a handful of states that have already put it into place, but I would say the majority of states are considering it.
Right. So the bottom line is your application can't say, "Have you been convicted of a felony?"
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's
after you offer if you do all of your other checks, you can't do a criminal check, criminal background check, because you can't know whether or not they have been convicted of a crime. And then when you've gone through all of your due diligence and you've selected them as an applicant, then you can ask them and you can run a criminal background check. So then you've kind of committed yourself. And I think this is a reason why these agencies have decided to implement these laws, is that then you're at a point where you have to decide, is it worth it to me to allow this person to be a tenant, or should I go back through my process or pick my next option?
Yeah, the whole point of it is obvious, that they want you to get past the pre-screening part first. So they want you to be able to select your person based on their other merits, and then, like you said, after you've made your decision, then you can take the next step, and you have to consider several things. What was the nature of the crime? How does it relate to the position? If they're being hired, how does it relate to that position specifically? So in other words, if you're hiring a CFO and they were convicted of, racketeering and embezzlement, that's probably a terrible position for them
Exactly.
to give them, any access to your company's financials. Same thing with, in a tenancy situation for a landlord, again, just trying to give you the idea of where they're coming from. If they were convicted of, I don't know, let's say a DWI, which I would consider a little less severe, obviously, than something like a convicted sex offender or somebody with a violent criminal history, or maybe, a long history of destruction of property and, some really obvious red flags as a landlord that you would want to avoid. So, the idea is to try and pre-screen them based on their qualifications and their own merits before you start looking at their criminal records.
It makes sense. I understand what they're trying to accomplish with these laws. It makes it difficult for us as landlords to do our job, because then we're having to go through the process without all of the information in front of us. And I think part of the problem is there are certainly many landlords, maybe you could even say most, who, if somebody says they have a conviction within the last 7 years, or if depending on how broad your question is. I know in the HR world, we had a limit. We could only say within the last 7 years. I
Right.
don't know if that's changed. That was many years ago when we had that. So if somebody says yes, do you automatically disqualify them just because they said yes, they've had a conviction?
Right.
And like you said, it could be something that doesn't really pertain. It could be a DUI. It could be something else that we wouldn't even think about, but they happen to be arrested and convicted for something that doesn't pertain to us renting to them. And certainly violent crimes, sex crimes, crimes against children, all of those things for all of us, I'm sure, are automatic big red flags. No, we're
Right.
not going to rent to this person. And I understand that they want us as landlords to look at the people as a whole rather than automatically discount them because they have a conviction.
Right.
But at the same time, it really makes the process a lot more difficult because we would have to select the person, offer them the property.
Mhm.
They would have to accept, and then we would have to do a criminal background check.
And for the most part, a lot of landlords are already within compliance because, like you said, I think most landlords do look at the nature of the offenses and the crimes. And we certainly, most of the calls that we get coming in at RentPrep when people are asking, what's this mean or what's this criminal offense, that's what they're doing. They're judging it at that point. They're making a decision. Okay, is this something I really need to be concerned about, or was it a bad judgment call 6 years ago and I can overlook it? So I think most landlords, for the most part, are already doing this. I think it's the idea of standardizing it that's probably going to in creating an actual process that's going to scare a lot of the landlords into thinking that they're maybe doing something wrong when they've actually been doing the right thing the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest impact is going to be not only for employers, because I think you're far more likely in an employment situation to rule out somebody who may have checked that box. So I can understand that to a point. The thing that concerns me and what you had mentioned was when you said the past 7 years. Now in California, that is the law still. But with things like ban the box, what's happening is it's kind of creating sort of a slippery slope, and now they're starting to try and pass more different limitations on how long you can use this information. It's even been suggested that California moved to 2 years, which in my mind is crazy.
Yes, I agree.
2 years is not enough time to say, okay, if the person has a violent crime, they're going to be rehabilitated 2 years later and ready to rejoin society. But I think that's the potential issue that you have with ban the box, and what scares a lot of people is where the slippery slope that it's on now is where does it stop? Okay, you know, does it have a disparate impact against a certain class or race? Possibly, but what limitations do you put on that? And so that's a huge topic right now in the background industry is, do you start changing the statutes in these states? And I think the overwhelming majority say no, but there's certainly advocates out there that think it's a good idea to change those statutes from 7 years to 2 or 3. Oregon, I'll give you a great example, just recently changed their eviction statute to 5 years when every other state is 7. So in Oregon, somebody could have been evicted 6 years ago and it would not show up on your background check because it aged itself off.
Right.
But if you were in California, it's still on there. So certain states are starting to play around with the idea of changing these statutes and changing things around. Um, it's so I feel like it's getting into some dangerous territory when you start changing things like that.
It is. And one of the things, the bottom line of this is it does not tell you you have to rent to this person even if they have a conviction.
Mhm.
It's only saying you can't find out about it until you've offered them
Mhm.
the property.
Right.
So after you offer it to them, then you might have to come back and say, I'm sorry, you have a criminal record and that doesn't meet my standards. And so I'm expecting ultimately it's not going to, the people who would have discounted that person because they checked the box
Hmm.
are still going to tell that person, no, you can't rent here. And
Right.
they'll go to the next person. The other people, and I think, as you said, there are a large number of landlords who would give it a reasonable consideration, determine what the crime was, and then decide. And I think they would do that whether they have the box or whether they have to wait until after the process is over. Might there be a little bit of a skew towards people who have criminal backgrounds who will end up getting a property? Their application will be accepted and they'll get the property. Maybe a few more than otherwise, but
Hmm.
it really makes it difficult for the landlords. And I understand what you're saying about the whole concept of these states starting to change the number of years that things can be
Hmm.
available to us. I mean, 2 years for criminal history, it makes no sense at all.
Right.
And unfortunately, what this seems to come back to is that some people claim that it unfairly discriminates based on races or ethnicities, because people say that, well, the facts are there are certain ethnic backgrounds that have a higher proportion of conviction rates than others. And many could claim and do claim that that's because the police pick on those races. But for whatever reason, they have a criminal record.
Right.
And especially if it's a violent criminal act, and if we can't find out about that, if that falls away after 2 years, I think that puts all of us, whether you're an employer or a landlord, in a very difficult situation. So I think that's even worse than ban the box. And like you said, does this lead to making those types of changes? And that's certainly a possibility.
Right.
If you are in a situation where your state, and there are 5 states currently that make this apply to private property owners, private landlords. If your state is one of those, and I don't have those in front of me, unfortunately, you have to make sure that you're following the process, which means that you have to offer this to a tenant and then run your criminal background check and then make your determination if they have a record, whether or not you want to rent to them.
Exactly. And I think the biggest takeaway for landlords is, you know, which is a difficult thing to do, especially because we talk a lot of times about the pre-screening process. And, a lot of times you can make a determination. Um, if you're screening 10 people, you may not need to run 10 background checks. You could look through the application and disqualify some people based on income requirements or things like that, and end up, out of 10 applicants and 10 applications, you only need to run 2 or 3 background checks. Well, the biggest takeaway for this is don't toss out the ones that, if you do have the box in there still that says I've been convicted of a felony, don't immediately toss those out.
Right.
Um, and in my opinion, I think it would be a good idea. And for different reasons, I think this is a good idea to ban the box. On your application, it may not be a terrible idea to get rid of that anyway. There's been situations that we've run into here where an applicant has checked that box that says that they've been convicted. Um, and maybe they didn't have a clear understanding of what the nature of their crime was, or how long it was going to stay on their record. And so when we run the background check, we see that they have a criminal record, but maybe it's not reportable because it was 10, 15 years ago or whatever the case is,
Sure.
and it's not there. But then the landlord gets that report back, and all kinds of alarms and whistles go off because they see it and say, oh my God, this says no criminal records, and this guy says he does have criminal records. And so there are definitely times where it causes a massive amount of confusion and concern unnecessarily because the person is not even aware that maybe maybe it was a felony arrest, and at the time that they made that they actually convicted the person, they were convicted under a misdemeanor,
That's right.
which has a statute of limitations and cannot be used after a certain point. And so then it becomes kind of a sticky situation for that landlord who may be making a decision based on wrong information. They're under the impression that it was a felony conviction and it really wasn't. So, I think banning the box may be a good thing for other reasons, you know. Um, so if you're a landlord and you have that box on there, definitely check with your local laws just to be sure. But I don't think you're missing out on a whole lot if you do get rid of it anyway. And it's probably a good idea, and you're staying well ahead of the curve if you do end up just ditching it anyhow. And just make sure that when you're doing your screening, you're considering all the things that you probably normally would anyway. You know,
Exactly.
what what was the nature of the crime? How does that affect my property? How does that affect my neighbors? In the unit or the surrounding area. Consider those things anyway.
Mhm.
And don't make that determination just based on what they're telling you anyway.
That's a good point. And I think you're right. Whether you have the box in the application or not is really not the issue. And I tend to agree with you. It doesn't make sense to have it on there when there are people who don't really know, unfortunately, they've been involved in legal situations. They don't really know what is showing up on their record and what truly was the outcome of their case.
Hmm.
And if you're going to run a background check, a criminal background check anyways, then let that tell you the story.
Yeah, perfect story. I had about a year ago, we had a girl who was on spring break in Florida who was arrested for having an open container on the beach. And even though this was a relatively benign criminal offense, as most people would consider it,
Hmm.
she went through the process of actually having it expunged, meaning she went through the court system to where they said, okay, we're going to wipe it off your record as though it never happened. The records still exist, but you have to rely on the background check company to be able to sort through those and say, okay, this one's expunged, it's not usable, and so we're going to just remove it completely.
Yeah.
But in this case, she had given that information to the landlord, saying, again, she checked the box, saying yes, she was, and it wasn't even a felony, but she still checked that box, and again created this whole thing when it was completely unnecessary, and she just wasn't aware. She was just trying to be honest, trying to be truthful.
Hmm.
But in reality, I mean, she could have just said nothing, and nothing would have came of it, and the record wouldn't have existed, and she had gone through the process of getting it expunged, and so it just created a whole created a lot of drama for no reason at all.
Yes. Well, we'll definitely work to keep people updated on the ban the box situation. And I'm sure over the course of the next year or so, we'll come across some additional updates and we'll be sure to pass that information along.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. I look forward to talking with you tomorrow evening.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to Landlord University, and remember to visit rentprep.com/landlordu to see show notes and access free resources like forms and guides. And be sure to check out Jeff Pearson hosting his own hit podcast at thementorimpact.com.